Welcome to the next decade of Market Buzz. I'm Greg Schnell, the Canadian technician and the host of this unique show. We look for long time frame trades on weekly charts. Please follow me on Twitter at Schnell Investor or head over to gregschnell.com and check things out on the website. Lots happening. Another big ride up here. I'm going to talk a little bit about my schedule next week. I'm on the Wealth 365 Summit, and there's I think 70 people presenting. So I'll be presenting at 9 a.m. Tuesday morning. It's free and it's a week long. So anyway, if you'd like to go there, it's summit.wealth365.com. Summit.wealth365.com, and register. Should be great. Lots of stuff given away over there. So anyway, head over there and see if there's anything there for you. And I'm also on the Final Bar with David Keller on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern. And I used to be on the Final Bar. It used to be a show I hosted. So it'll be interesting to be back with Dave and lots to talk about. We're going to do some specific stuff on commodities next week because we've had some questions come in about that. So lots going on from there. And obviously commodities are closely related to China. China's GDP number came out today. It was pretty good. So now we're watching to see if we're going to get any sort of economic thrust out of the metals, minerals, commodities, all that stuff. So lots to cover. Oops, I forgot one thing. Let's go back and finish that. Next is the agenda for today. And what we have options expiration Friday, and of course it's during earnings. So that's one I always like to focus on. We've got a big rotation within the financials, and I want to show that to you. There are lots of financial stocks rolling over. There are a few turning up. So that makes it pretty interesting. But the bond moves this week are really starting to play out. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So between all of that, we're going to cover off these financials with the bond moves and see what's heading higher. And hopefully you'll find that informative. With today's intraday view, so this is literally just update. The NASDAQ since the year end is up over 500 points already. So that is a remarkable feat. In just a couple of weeks, I guess that would be 3 weeks, but really a crazy move that we've seen to the upside. So looking at the daily view, this thing is just, I mean, other than 3 days in here of red candles, it's been up and away since October 3rd. Really ballistic move. And on the weekly, I've mentioned it a couple of times already, but this PPO up here at over 4% is huge. And we briefly got up there to this height back in January 2018. And that was a bit of an exhaustion thrust. And then we pulled back, and the NASDAQ went on to make new highs shortly after that. But in general, we are in a very optimistic mood. So one of the issues, and I heard Kenny Polcari mention it this morning. He said, I thought this market was going to pull back 2 weeks ago, and all of my data showed a pullback. Well, now it's all resurging again. So we're going to keep watching to just see. We're going to keep watching to see what's going on here. Why am I getting that? Cancel. Hit the wrong button, and I closed my Safari. That's what happened. My apologies. Don't usually screw up like that. Okay, so anyway, one of the big things that I'm worried about, obviously, is the length of this run has been very long, and usually we get some oscillation in here. We haven't had that. So with that, I'm going to cover off these banks. What I've done is I've gone through and I've annotated all of the charts. I've got about 80 charts that we're going to go through quite quickly. But today I've grouped them in the order of their industry group. And what you're going to find just overall is if we look, this is a 1 week performance. And what we see is some of these in the asset management group have just been flying. And then when we go down and look at regular banks, they're all over the place. I will say some of the Canadian banks look like they're starting to turn up. And a lot of times they'll put in a big run towards the end of February And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that the Canadian donation period for their registered retirement savings plan has to be in before the end of February. And on years following big years in the market, people are more willing to put money in. So there's a nice thrust that usually comes along in that bank period. So anyway, we're going to cover that off. Canada really has five big banks and then 3 or 4 little ones. But those big banks, you've probably heard of them. If you're a golfer, you'll know RBC. TD's the biggest location bank in New York, New York State, and then Bank of Montreal is another big one. So BMO Financial. Anyway, across those, I think there's some names in there that look good, and the charts are turning up. So we'll point out some of the charts that haven't started to move yet, and some that are just starting to lift. And lastly, I want to cover off these investment services. And what you see down here is they're having a stunning week, and Morgan Stanley really blew it out of the water when you compared it with Goldman Sachs. But even on the back of that, Goldman Sachs is following the whole move higher. So what's unequivocal here is these investment services. So the indexes or the exchanges like CBOE and CME Group and the NASDAQ Group are all flying. And then we've got other ones, Intercontinental Exchange Group is in there as well. But then we've got other ones like Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Raymond James, that are really making big moves out of bases, and they're probably important to watch. So anyway, I think there's lots of informative stuff that we need to cover off in the financials. So let's jump into the charts here. I'm going to go through on a 10 per page basis, and we're just going to roll through. So here's the affiliated, I should just delete this one, action. And one of the things that, let me just reset this because that'll keep my number count right. So what we see here on this affiliated managers is, big downtrend, and we're starting to get a lot of positive divergence, but it's still under zero. So I'm not that happy with this particular chart. I'd want to see momentum actually get into the positive space above zero. But it's really tightly coiled here for the last 6 or 9 months. Any sort of pop above this 90, 92 level would probably be the breakout you're looking for. So that one's quite interesting, but hasn't really started to turn up. It generates about 1.5% yield. This Franklin, this is the Templeton product line. What you see here is making new 5-year lows, got down here, looks like it's trying to reverse and head higher. I mean, you're bottom fishing with that one because the chart's really quite ugly. Nothing particularly inspiring about that chart. Bank of New York Mellon, what we see here is big sell-off this week obviously on earning news. So they definitely missed their opportunity to kind of follow all of the other banks higher. But looking at this 52.50 level, that's pretty significant resistance now, and I think support is down here around 40, so this probably has some room to go down. We are sitting on the 40-week moving average, so we'll see if it can hold up. BlackRock's been outstanding, and they continue to deliver some good numbers. The chart this week, so you can see we broke out of a 52-week high back in October when the rally started, going into November, and it's been, I don't want to say grumbling higher, but it's moved up $30 on 500, so about 5% over 2 months. And then all of a sudden this week, we're putting in a 5% move. So really a big development here where it's starting to take off to the upside. And we're testing the prior highs of 2 years ago. Wouldn't be too long to get back to 562, and we're sitting at 535. So another couple of percentage points and we'd be up there. Momentum trend is nice, positive, well above zero. Everything looks strong on that chart. Invesco, this one I like for a couple of reasons. One is the momentum is finally moving above zero for the first time. This stock was selling off hard in 2018, made a double bottom base here in 2019, and looks like it's ready to try and get everything back in positive position. So momentum above zero, full stochastics finally registering up around the 80 level. And moving above both the 10-week and the 40-week moving averages. So this looks well set up to run here. The Jefferies Financial Group, this is making new 52-week highs. Last week it shot up and then pulled back. This week it looks like it's going to close on the new 52-week high. So that's another bullish sentiment. Pays about a 2% dividend and a 4% move on the week. And what I really like is this PPO momentum is at the highest level it's been in 2 years. So it looks like it's trying to get going. I'd set my stop just around that 21 level. Northern Trust Corporation, this one looks like it's trying to do a 2-year breakout here, very, very close to it. PPO is just pulling back a little here. I don't actually expect it to break down past this green line, but if you got to pull back a little deeper, it might be a better place to enter. State Street, this one had a big week so far, up 3.7%, pushing up nicely, but you can see that since the breakout, and we saw the same sort of configuration on the charts up a little bit here. This chart here where you kind of get this big down move, and then it finally consolidates for a while and starts to shoot up. I don't know if we're going to get that same sort of response, but this consolidation period here, shooting up, that's kind of what I'm looking for out of some of these other ones to start getting on the bandwagon. But this is obviously a really nice move. T. Rowe Price, this one's just breaking out to new 2-year highs and all-time highs, so nothing wrong with that chart. Really big base that it's built here, and a measured move would be 80 to 120, so 120 to 160, and it's at 130 now. That looks okay. I'd want to use 120 as my hard support. If it doesn't hold that, I'd probably let it go. Australia, this chart's just been dwindling lower, so I would stay away from it. And again, sometimes I sort them based on how they're doing lately, so we put all the strong ones first. In this particular case, I've tried to sort them by industry group so that so that we can see the changes in the industry group, because I think it's meaningful to see how that's starting to rotate. So here we've got Bank of America, and we can see the scooter ranking is starting to roll over this week. It really didn't respond that much to earnings, and I noticed that they changed some management on the back of their earnings report this week. So that'll be interesting to watch, see if that matters. I know Brian's still there at the top, but some other changes midway. Anyway, consolidating for 6 weeks here in a very tight pattern. So the real question, can it finally thrust up, or does this roll over and fall below the 10-week? So big, I'll call it a pivotal time here for it, because it broke out above this 31.85, made it up to $35 here in the fall run, and now it's just trying to hold above the 10-week. I sure wouldn't be selling it here unless it started to break down hard, but I want to watch the rest of these charts and see if they break down. Bank of Beijing, I think we have some informative information here. If it likes the results of this trade war, one thing that's important to notice is this big kind of 5-year weakening trend of momentum. And if we could start to break out here, get above zero for the first time in a year and a half, that would probably be a big change. And again, this was kind of when tariffs started. So here we are after phase one. Could it possibly pop through? Bank Bilboa, Argentina, we just see this one looking like it's rolling over right at zero. This isn't a place I'd want to be long. When they go below zero, typically that's what we call the winter position, and all of a sudden you see the stock give it up here. So I would probably avoid this one here, even though it's right at its 10-week and 40-week. Barclays PLC looks to me like it wants to roll over too, so that's not quite as comforting. And again, the same thing as Bank of America. The scooter ranking is rolling over, full stochastic rolling over, trying to hold the 10-week. I don't want to be particularly bearish on these, but some of these chart patterns are starting to show that. Here's Bank of Montreal looking like it wants to break through this 2-year trend line, make a positive move to the upside. So it's one I like with a 3.8% yield. And I think usually those are kind of next weekish that you'd have to be an owner to collect the divvy. BNP Paribas, we can see it rolling over as well. So that's a little bit of a question mark. Bank of Nova Scotia, another Canadian bank, heavy in Latin America. And you could just see consolidation hasn't really enjoyed any of the fall run, consolidating sideways here for whatever, 12, 13, 14 weeks. What we'd really like to see here is that this thing finally starts to kick above the 10-week, and we might start to see that on the back of the RRSP rush for Canadians. So looking at Banco Santander, we've got a sideways consolidation here for a year. Chart doesn't inspire me. I'd probably avoid. Citigroup is putting on a nice move here. And one of the things they discussed the other day was how many shares they've been repurchasing. But the chart clearly needed to break through $76, let's call it $77, and now it's shooting over 80. So this looks really nice, and a breakout here above this range is a welcome sight. I wouldn't want it to start failing here down below this 75 level. That would be a problem for me. So it'd be really a rolling over false breakout, and that would be a problem. Citizens Financial, this one breaking out to new 52-week highs on a Friday here, but a very positive spot on the chart. It's trying to uptrend, and again, if it fails at this 10-week, I think I'd just let them go. So what we're seeing on a lot of these banks is this test of the 10-week right now, kind of an important area on the charts. I'm going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back. We'll continue this, and I want to finish up with the investment managers at the end and maybe a brief look into the bond market. So we'll take a break right now.
I was staring at the north wall of my barn.
Okay.
It's 70 feet long, it's about 18 feet high, and just blank. And I said to myself, 2017, I'm going to be 50 years in the business. Wouldn't it be cool if I could just put the history of the stock market? That's where the idea came from. I wanted to capture my 50 years.
Okay, we're back, and we're going to start with China Construction Bank. And what we can see here is a 52-week high is within sights, but this stock is in the penny range. So let's kind of move along off that. Here's Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. This chart's already rolling over in momentum, so that's a little bit concerning. It's below its 10-week moving average. I want to see this turn up well above zero. That's a positive thing that we'd want to watch for. And you can see the momentum has been below zero for a year, finally shot up. What we'd like to see is it get above zero and then restart. And usually momentum turns above zero are usually great places to get back on board if you missed the first one. Comerica, this one's got a pretty clear trend, I think, and nothing that we want to see, but rolling over it at zero on momentum again. Credit Agricole starting to roll over, really hasn't done anything, let's call it 10 weeks, hanging around that $7 level and starting to lose its momentum. So that's a French one. Here's Credit Suisse, and this one's been breaking out to a new 52-week high. No real volume showing up on the breakout, so that's a little lackluster. DBS Group, we just see this consolidating sideways, nothing I'd want to touch. Fifth and Third Bank Corp, this one broke out to a new 52-week high, and you can see this rollover and now falling below the 10-week moving average. So it's one of the things that I'm noticing in the banks in general, that they aren't doing as well. And we probably, one of the things to notice is that rotation that we talked about, the asset managers at the top and the investment managers at the bottom, starting to be a little better. But here's Huntington Bank shares rolling over as well. HDFC rolling over here. And again, I'm just sorting it by industry group, so no real magic here, but double topping so far with a lot lower momentum on the second high. That's not that bullish. HSBC, this one's been grinding lower and hasn't really had any sort of spark. We'd want to see this get above zero in momentum and really start to turn it up if it could. Okay, HSBC, just a continuous run here. Relatively smooth. ICICI Bank working its way up, but again, 6 or 8 weeks consolidating while the rest of the market's roaring higher. Intesa Sanpaolo, we just see this one struggling here at 52-week highs and starting to roll over on momentum. Again, I like that it got above zero. Now we want to see this kind of pull back a little and start to take off. Unibanco, nothing really going on here, consolidating sideways for a year, so pretty dead. Here's the big elephant in the room, JP Morgan Chase, breaking out of this base. I think if you'd been reading any of the blogs on StockCharts, you'd have seen this big breakout, and it moved off the 120 level up to 140. So I'll call it $20 on 120, not bad, 15 or 20% since the breakout. But what we see here is after earnings this week, which were quite frankly great earnings, the market's just taking it sideways and it's still trying to hold its 10-week. So this looks a little more judgmental if you're trying to trade in and out of it. It's already paid out its dividend, so you might have a little bit of free time here. I would draw a trend line up off these lows, and if that started to break, again, you'd have to be a trader to get in and out of JP Morgan. But in general, it continues to perform on average with the S&P 500 with rare surges above into the top performing stocks. Key Corp broke out to a new 52-week high, but rolling over already. So don't really like that. Don't want to see my PPO trend line break. Anyway, all of these banks, you're starting to see the same thing, either struggling at resistance or starting to lose a little bit of momentum. And here's Mizuho Group out of Japan, rolling over, failing at the 10-week, now testing the 40-week. Momentum might go below zero here. I wouldn't want to own it if it hits the winter position. Looking at this M&T Bank, sideways, no 52-week highs here, struggling to try and break out. Mitsubishi Financial, same thing, another Japanese bank rolling over. And we're starting to see this trend line break. I'm going to jump ahead here. Just go over, here's another Japanese bank rolling over, falling under the 10-week. TD Bank, this is the one I mentioned earlier. So a Canadian bank, but trying to break out through a new 2-year high. You want to see this really get turned up here. And Royal Bank is one of the other banks doing really well in Canada, and it also broke out this week. So 3 of the Canadian banks starting to look good. That TD is the third one that looks like it's getting set up to start pushing higher. UBS, you can start to see the new 52-week high, but again, a little bit of volume last week on it, and then kind of sideways this week. So I've just drawn an upsloping trend line here. I want to see that hold. US Bank Corp, this one's clearly rolled over and is now trying to hold its 40-week moving average. PPO trend line is broken. For me, that would be a sell signal. I'd let somebody else own it or at least have some protection on it. Westpac Banking Corp, this one's trying to turn back up after getting down to near, I'll call it 4-year lows. So I want to see this turn back up here. It's not a chart I'm particularly enthralled with yet on the basis of the other ones rolling over. Here's Wells Fargo doing the same thing, rolling over hard. Zions Bank Corp, we can see this one trying to roll over. So nothing really going on here. Now we're getting into the asset managers. And what I like, or sorry, the other areas of the market, the investment banks, and this is Equifax breaking out to new highs here. Ameriprise Financial, this one looks like it's ready to go through to new all-time highs, putting on a nice move this week, up 2.5%. TD Ameritrade, really, after all of the Charles Schwab stuff going on with it, it looks like it's trying to break this big downtrend here and could start to surge up. Getting over into CBOE Holdings, this one has been consolidating sideways, and it hasn't started to move up yet. We'll see some of the other ones have actually started to turn the tables here. Here's CME Group starting to rotate back up above the 10-week and 40-week moving average. PPO trying to bounce off a level above zero here. And we can see this has been a pretty positive stock for 4 years. So it doesn't look like a place to walk away. It looks more like a place to re-enter and try to pick it up near the 40-week as it starts to head higher. E-Trade Financial wants to push through this downtrend line. I think it needs to make it through there before I'd want to take a position. Goldman Sachs, this is a nice thrust this week. So it broke to new 52-week highs in late November. It's on its way higher here. Won't pay a big yield, but you're starting to see this really nice push. And again, Morgan Stanley's making the same thing. Here's another exchange, Intercontinental, starting to turn up. I like that push. Here's the Morgan Stanley move. Wow, that was a big gun coming off the earnings announcement there, and this shot up. Here's 56.70. We're at 56.93, looking like we'll close at a new all-time high for the stock. NASDAQ OMX Group starting to shoot up. So you can see these charts here at the end are all improving instead of kind of rolling over like the banks. And by going through all these charts together, it just gives you an idea of what's going on in the big picture when we sort it by asset class, or industry group. So what you see here is this Raymond James Financial. This stock starting to break out new 52-week highs. Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs. There's a theme here. They're all starting to put a nice move on. Here's the Charles Schwab move, starting to turn up higher here after testing the 10-week. Moody's, this one just keeps accelerating higher. And MSCI, this one's accelerating higher. So all of these are starting to break out. And I really want to make that point clear. You can see the rotation inside the banks or inside the financial sector from the banks into some of these other areas. So again, let's go back to the summary. And, again, without going through all the financials of everybody's, we see these asset managers at the top. This is intraday, but here's the 1 week. And we can see most of them had a great week with the exception of Bank of New York Mellon. And, this is a pretty heady move. Most of these are 3-4% on the week. That's huge. Then we go into the banks and it kind of settles down here. And then we go back into the investment services and you can really see how much these are starting to outperform. So again, it's changing from the banks into these investment services and asset managers. So I think I've laid that out clearly. I want to go over and just cover off the bonds quickly. And the reason I want to do that, here's TLT, and it's been quite, not difficult, but it's been something we've been watching closely to see which way this is going to resolve. And I wouldn't say it's over yet, but if the bond ETF here was going to start to fall, right, that's going to push yields higher. So we're watching this very closely, but you can see we had a downsloping trend line and we started to break through it. And we had broken this big uptrend line coming down, now broke back through it. Now we're breaking back down. So I'd say we're still in kind of a consolidation area here on TLT, and this is unadjusted, which means I've taken the yield out or the dividend payment out. So we're just looking at raw price. And then what we see here on this chart, we're stuck between 135, 140, and we really need to see which way this wants to move. My BlackRock Muni Fund, I like to use it to help me with the 10-year, and it's pointing straight up. It's pulling back slightly this week, but I'm still waiting to figure out which way the 10-year wants to go. And typically, this tells me that money still wants to move into these, into bonds. So here's the 10-week or the 10-year on a weekly chart. And what you see is this big downtrend line that's really, it would be the opposite of what we saw on that TLT chart. And what we want to see is which way this goes. But look at this major trend line on the PPO. And if I just open this chart up a little bit more, it might make it more obvious. But what we see is this big downsloping trend line on momentum here. And, that trend, so here we were making higher highs in price, lower highs in momentum. That's the divergence we worry about. And, this is kind of when everybody in the banks are talking about going to 5%. And what does the market do? Literally shoots up for a couple more weeks and then rolls back down. Now we're sitting on the other side of this trend line, and the real question is, which way are we going to break? So we're right at the trend line. Even if it got up to zero and started to roll over again here, I'd be worried. Now, we can see that the PPO momentum has been declining for 6 or 8 weeks while we approach this trend line. It's not clear which way this wants to go, but once we get resolution on this, I think it's going to be a meaningful trend change if it does break through. And if it rolls over here, we've spent enough time in a big positive market that this should have been able to break out. And if it hasn't, that's probably a bigger deal. So this 180, 190, 2% level, all of this is a pretty important inflection point for us on the charts. I realize that's a pretty wide range, but again, it's been trying to do it. So maybe we get a thrust through next week and then we stall. I don't know, but we've been trying for a while to get through here. And if we don't succeed, it's not a freight train I'd want to stand in front of. Really quick, the 3-month, so it's been trying to base in here. And so you have to remember that we've had all of this non-QE, but QE. And so what we're watching for is the 3-year. If it was to start to turn and accelerate higher, that would kind of confirm more of a bull market trend. And at this point, it hasn't done that yet. So we need to watch that. Heading into next week, again, options expiration today. So we need to watch the outcome, how the market treats it. Was it just kind of running us up into the close? So thanks for taking the time to join me on Market Buzz. Market Buzz airs live Wednesdays and Friday mornings at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. You can also see the recordings on StockCharts TV YouTube page, and you can also watch it live on StockCharts TV. So thanks for taking the time. And again, if you wanted to catch me during the Wealth 365 Summit next week, do that. Thanks, everybody.